Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Winter can be hard on plants. Today we're going to take a look at a few ways to protect them. Also, wildlife can be a nuisance. Today we're going to talk about how to keep deer, geese, and armadillos out of the garden. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Dr. Lilia Kelly. Dr. Kelly is a retired Mississippi State Extension horticulture specialist, and Mr. D will be joining me later. All right, Doc, it's always good to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here.
Right.
It's been a little while.
It's been a little while.
Yeah.
Now it's cold.
Yeah.
So now we have to talk about
Yep.
what? Protecting our plants in the winter landscape. So how do we do that?
Putting the garden to bed.
Putting the garden to bed.
Well, the thing about this time of year, going into the winter, is you have to watch the weatherman to bring in your tender plants.
Right.
You know, you've got all these things growing out in your yard and you want to protect them and bring them in. If you've got the tender things like the house plants, having the weatherman on or watching on your phone, you know, checking your weather app to see what the lows are at night, and then to look for the predictions of frost and freezes. I did a little reading, Chris, on the difference in frost and freeze, because that's always kind of confused me. You know, a frost is just, apparently according to the meteorology guys, is just when there's visible frost. Okay. Well, see, that didn't explain a lot. So I'm thinking, okay, and it's, you can have a freeze and not a frost. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
It all depends. Yeah. And, but it all depends, apparently, on the water vapor in the air. Okay. Check the weatherman, and, you know, if it says frost or freeze, you know, take precautions. Obviously, a freeze is something that's, the air is below freezing. Gotcha. So it's going to do damage to plants that cannot stand, you know, freezing temperatures. A lot of things we have can withstand a frost. You know, some things like our vegetables even taste better with a frost.
Season vegetables, like
like turnips and radishes and carrots and the cabbage and the broccoli and all these cool season vegetables. And I got to thinking, well, now why is that? Why do these things taste better? Well, you know what I found out? That in some plants, that when cold weather comes, it triggers in these plants to store and produce more sugar. So that's why your turnips are always sweeter, as my grandmama said, after, you know, a lot of cold weather.
Good to know that. Okay.
So yeah, so it's putting all that sugar in there, getting ready for winter, because if you know something's got a lot of sugar, the freezing point for it's lower.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So
that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So plant tenderness, you know, you have to look at that and figure out, you know, what needs to be protected and what doesn't. And some plants that are hardy, even in your zone, supposedly, can be damaged by quickly falling temperatures of long duration. They haven't had time to acclimate to a gradual cold, and if it just bop, we get what do they call those Arctic whatevers that come in. Yeah, the Arctic blast comes in. You know, that can damage. So pay attention again to the weatherman and see, because he'll tell you if there's an Arctic whatever coming in, and to protect your dogs and, you know, all your animals and all that stuff. But there's all kinds of types of protection. Okay, yeah, let's get into that. Yeah, that we can use. And if you just want to cover the plant, you know, with a protective covering, plastic is not the best. A lot of people just throw a garbage bag over something. That doesn't offer a whole lot of protection, especially if the plastic touches the plant, because the cold from the plastic, you can get damage. So things that are more insulated, like blankets, or I've used old sleeping bags that I go to the thrift stores and buy the old blankets, the old sleeping bags. You can use styrofoam coolers. Work good. You know, old styrofoam coolers. You can use buckets. You can use those are called cloches, right? The fancy name is something that you turn over on top of the plant that's got a shape to it, kind of holds it up off of it. So like a milk jug. I know you've seen people protect their tomatoes with a cut up bottom off a milk jug or a 2-liter Coke bottle or something like that. And I've even used my old tomato cages to put around plants that I want to protect that I know could get some damage from suddenly dropping temperatures and I use my tomato cage and then wrap the blanket around that and then cover the top because
that is good.
The soil holds heat.
Right. That is
particularly
good.
if it's a wet soil and that heat radiates up out of the ground overnight, so you want to capture that.
Right. Don't want to lose it.
Yeah, don't want to lose that radiant heat from the earth. So covering that up, takes the, keeps that heat in there. So let's see, what else? I had some other things. Oh, baskets, like bushel baskets. I mean, just whatever you've got that you can use that's, around the house, or you can order fancy things online. Like the water towers and stuff, that you fill up with water and it goes around your tomatoes and stuff. But there are a lot of things in the, catalogs that have row covers.
Yeah.
The white row covers. Right. Yeah, that will hold temperature, a couple of degrees.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So should you remove the covering?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you definitely need to remove whatever you've got if it's a sunny, bright day, because it'll be just like the greenhouse effect. Yeah. It's going to rapidly build up temperature in that little enclosed space, and you're going to wind up killing the thing regardless of your good efforts.
All right, good.
So whatever you cover them with, there's a couple of things to remember. It needs to make ground contact because of the heat coming from the earth. You can put it down if it's a blanket, and you need to kind of stake things up. If you're using a blanket or a sleeping bag or an old quilt or something like that, or space blankets. You can use the space blankets that they have that campers use and stuff. Put the luminized side down though, because that radiates heat straight back to the heat that comes up from the ground radiates right back. So put it down on the ground contact. Put like bricks or pieces of board, or just use pin downs. Right. I cut up old wire coat hangers and make my own pins. Okay. Recycle and use those to hold everything down so that no air and the heat can't get out from under there.
Oh, so, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, and don't cinch if you've got a plant that you're wanting to completely cover. Don't cinch it around the trunk.
Okay, got it.
Because what are you doing? You're losing the heat coming from the earth.
Got it. Okay.
So, and I know up north sometimes if they got a bad snowstorm and with cold winter winds, you can get that wind burn from stuff, and they'll wrap like burlap or whatever around their evergreens so you don't get that tip burn. But down here in the south, we don't have to worry about that so much. No, we don't worry about that too much. Right, not too much. Let's see, of course, taking it off, be sure and do that. And then there's other things besides covering, the plant to add the protection. We can mulch. We were talking about that earlier about, and don't cover the crown. That's important. If it's a perennial, you don't want to mound up everything on top of it because it holds the moisture in and you get the crown all wet and rotten and you wonder why the thing don't come up next spring because you were so careful, putting the mulch, because mulch does a lot of good things, obviously. Sure. It insulates the soil and keeps the temperatures from fluctuating up and down. It's kind of like a buffer, or an insulation for that. And you can also group pots together, make a big cluster of them if you've got a bunch of,
at the nurseries.
Yeah, they'll cluster them together and then they'll throw mulch on top of all that, especially woodies, the woody plants. Right. And just make a mound of it, and that will work really well, like old sawdust, or you get from an old sawmill, or just whatever, some kind of mulch. And you can also, with young trees, there's a cold damage that you get if you've got a young sapling, a fruit tree or something. It can get sun scald on the trunks, in the winter on the south or southwest. When the sun hits it and it's been really cold and that tissue thaws and they burst, the cells burst, you get that bark splitting or trunk splitting. So there's things you can do to prevent that. You can wrap an old blanket around it for the winter, and you can buy these tree collars or whatever they call them, that protect the trunk. And you can also, this is what I've done, with little saplings that are, about an inch, maybe in diameter, no bigger, like a pipe, like your conduit and stuff. You use the pipe insulation. Those foam tube things that are slit down the side. You just slide that thing on the trunk,
You tell me some good stuff.
Yeah, and that works great. Or you can use those old, what's those things called, those pool things? Yeah, noodles, that's it. Yeah. Well, see, they got a hole in them, so you just cut through that, and you can get several out of that thing, and they're cheap.
How about that?
So, yeah, that works too. So that kind of insulates to keep you from having sun scald on your young trunks. And another thing that you may not think of, but you know when I said a while ago that saturated soil holds more heat.
Where you going?
So always, if it's dry and there's a cold wave coming, water the plants well.
Okay.
Because you're going to retain more heat in the soil. So make sure that, you know, your plants are watered well before that real cold, freezing weather comes through.
Yeah, I don't think people think about that.
No, they don't.
Right.
Don't think about watering in the winter and going in the fall. Yeah, they don't.
I don't think about that. That was some good stuff. We appreciate that.
Sure, yeah, I've killed a lot of plants, so I know some tricks, you know.
Yeah, this is definitely going to help protect our plants in our winter landscape,
Yeah.
so thank you much for that.
All the annuals here are begonias, but as you can see, they don't look even. And one of the reasons is all annuals in the nursery are given growth retardants to help branch and keep the plant compact. And environmental factors are what causes them to grow or be stunted, like this begonia here. Nice and compact and blooming, but not filled in like it should have. And then you have other problems here of stem rot that has killed these first two begonias. And I'm standing here and there's water standing on top of the ground and I'm squishing. There is something wrong with the irrigation system that's not evenly distributing water to all of these plants. And some are way too wet and others have getting just the right amount of water to be nice and even.
All right, Mr. D, nuisance wildlife. You want to start with geese?
Let's start with geese. Let's start with geese.
All right.
It's one of the few that I don't have a problem with at my house.
Okay, all right.
But geese can be a problem, especially if you have a pond or close to a pond. And in the last several years, we've had resident populations of geese, especially around golf courses and things like that. And you know, my personal opinion, if they're residents, they're not migratory, and I don't personally think they ought to be covered under migratory bird laws. But my local game warden doesn't agree with me on that, and so I'm not going to argue the point. But anyway, there are several things that you can do that might help. I know one thing that I've seen in my career. One time, the population of, and it was actually ducks, got so high in one of the neighborhoods here in Memphis that they developed a disease, and there was just a massive die-out, and there were dead ducks everywhere. And it was, I think, a form of cholera or something like that, that it was a type of disease that affected the ducks because the population got so high. So that can possibly happen if you get really, really high populations. But these geese are vegetarians, of course, and they can damage wheat populations and things because they'll pull the plants up by the roots. They don't just bite a little neat piece off of a leaf. They'll pull up small plants. They've been used in gardens before. If you get the garden plants up a pretty good size, they've actually used them for weed control in gardens because they'll go in and they'll eat the small weeds in gardens. So that's one good thing about them.
Right.
And they're also very tasty on the Thanksgiving dinner table. You know, that's another good thing about geese. So if any of them happen to meet their demise, you can kind of keep that in mind. Okay. But damage, and I went to Prevention and Control of Wildlife Damage. This is an old publication, and
we'll make sure we get that link up there.
You can get this this same publication, but modify the habitat. If you have ponds and it's your pond, you can make the sides more vertical. You know, bring in a trusty trackhoe and instead of having gentle slopes to going into the pond, make it more vertical. Eliminate nesting areas around the pond. If you've got a little island out in the middle of the pond like some people do, that's perfect for the geese to nest out there, and the predators, it's not as easy for the predators to get out there, so you don't want that kind of thing. You can use fences, install fences around ponds, gardens, and yards. Install, I don't know how practical this is, overhead grids or netting on ponds, reservoirs, and fish raceways. Change some of the cultural methods, change the timing of planting and harvesting of vulnerable crops, produce winter grains instead of spring grains. use less preferred plant species in parks, cemeteries, and lawns.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't know what those species are. Frightening is something that you can do, and there's a lot of things here that frighten them, and I personally think the last one is the best.
I bet I know what that is.
Flags, mylar tape, balloons, scarecrows, water spray devices, automatic exploders, pyrotechnics, recorded distress calls, and dogs.
Oh, okay.
Dogs.
All right, dogs.
Labrador,
Okay.
a retriever, anything that's
All right.
used to hunting dogs are really, really good at keeping geese away.
Okay.
So that's really good for frightening. Live capture, there's a time during a goose's life that he can't fly, he or she can't fly when they're molting, and you can herd them up like cattle. And that's during the summertime, I think, maybe late summer, or mid to late summer. They're molting, and you can herd them up like cattle and put them in a cattle trailer and haul them off and take them to your neighbors, or you need to check with your local game warden about before you do that, and make sure that because it is illegal to transport wild game without. But those are some things. The best thing, shooting 12-year-old with a 20 gauge shotgun. That is the best thing that you can do where it's legal, and that says it here. Hunting is the preferred method. Shoot them, shoot them, shoot them.
All right. So what about deer?
Deer. 12-year-old with a 20 gauge shotgun also on deer. Deer are a worsening problem. More of a problem.
Okay.
And Tennessee Wildlife Federation has changed. All the counties of West Tennessee are now Unit L counties, and that means a hunter can kill 3 does a day. And up until a few years ago, Shelby, Tipton, some of the counties right around Memphis were not Unit L counties, but now because of the high deer populations, they are. Unfortunately, fewer and fewer people are hunting. We need more people out there shooting deer. We need more hunters. It's a very tasty, nutritious product. Venison is an outstanding food product, and if we had more people, that is one of the best ways to get the numbers down.
But can you shoot those in the city?
Can you shoot them in the city?
Ordinance?
No.
Okay.
No, you can't shoot them in the city legally.
Right.
You can't
Legally?
do that. Now, there are exceptions. I know President's Island has a shooting season for bow hunters. Of course, it's highly regulated. I would encourage, we could put pressure on legislators to have that happen in other areas. In my opinion, Shelby Farms is someplace we might want to consider doing some kind of bow season there because it is really a problem. There are a lot of deer out there, and we have a lot of deer automobile collisions on Walnut Grove Road, and it's kind of dangerous.
Okay.
But I'm also afraid that we're going to reach a population where they do the same thing. That chronic wasting disease. There's some diseases that occur, and you'll start finding dead deer everywhere when that happens, and it actually adversely affects the population. So if you manage them with predators, that is a good thing, and it actually makes the deer population more healthy. But exclusion, fences, electric fences, tall fences is a good way to you can get pretty good. And I personally have some success with doing that out at Agri Center. But frightening, gas exploders, pyrotechnics, gunfire, or tethered dogs. Again, your dog is a good deer excluder. But that's about it. We need to hunt more.
All right. So what about armadillos?
Armadillos. They're
all over the place
They're kind
now.
of a little different critter. They're out there digging around in your yard looking for grub worms.
I've had them in my yard recently.
Yeah. So I guess you could consider them a beneficial critter because they eat grub worms. About 90% of their diet are insects. They do eat a few earthworms too, but they're eating grub worms and those kind of May beetle and June beetle larvae and Japanese beetle larvae and things like that. They're eat a lot of that. They're a real interesting critter. They every year the female gives birth to quadruplets, identical quadruplets. Wow. They're one egg that's fertilized by they're identical twins. So if you've got one armadillo out there, There's 3 more somewhere, probably, unless it got hit by a car. And you know, when you scare one, if you walk up behind an armadillo and clap your hands, he's going to jump up.
Ah, so
He'll jump like 3 feet off the ground. And unfortunately, that doesn't work well when you have an 18-wheeler bearing down toward you.
Right.
And if they just lay there and kind of crouch down a little bit, they'd be all right. If they don't know, they jump up.
They jump up.
And it gets them.
Oh, man.
But shooting 12-year-old 20-gauge shotgun, man, that's one of the most commonly used methods. Again, inside the city limits, you need to check with local authorities. Right. Shoot only where it's legal to shoot.
Sure.
Yeah. But clear brush and other cover to reduce their habitat. You can trap them. They're pretty easy to trap in a live trap. They're not real smart, and if you put some 1x6s, 10 or 8-foot 1x6s, and create wings and kind of guide them into your trap as they're digging around, they just kind of, and then you put some.
Do you have to bait the trap?
You do need to bait the trap. Overripe or spoiled fruit is a good bait. Other suggested baits are rotten meat, fetid meat, and mealworms.
Mealworms.
Yeah. But again, wildlife damage control. It's University of Nebraska and Lincoln that's got this kind of information on about every critter that you can think of.
That's good stuff. All right.
Good luck with the armadillos.
Good luck.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Mr. D. Good stuff, man.
Well, this happens to be a cherry tree, but it is a thin-barked tree, and many thin-barked trees get sun scald. And you can see this sun scald here has tried to heal and is doing okay. Sun scald happens in the wintertime when the temperatures outside heat up during the day and the sun is beating on the thin-skinned bark of the tree. And then at night, when temperatures fall, the tree bark cracks, and that's what causes sun scald. This one is trying to heal, but unfortunately, this one over here is a worst case scenario. It can't heal, and since there was no nutrients flowing on this side, this particular branch failed, and now we've got a real big problem, and this tree has serious issues with its health.
All right, here's our Q&A segment. Y'all ready?
Ready.
These are great questions. Here's our first viewer email. Each spring, I have to buy a new butterfly bush because they never survive the winter. I do not mulch it because I have watched several care videos that say not to mulch it because they don't like moisture in the winter. What should I do to help it make it through this upcoming winter? This is Kara from Natchez, Mississippi. So how about that? So butterfly bush, but it never survived the winter. And we're talking about Natchez, Mississippi.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I wasn't familiar with the zones, the plant hardiness zones of a butterfly bush. And I was a little surprised that from what I read, it's hardy all the way to zone 5, which is cold.
Yes.
And Natchez all the way from 5 to 9. Okay, and Natchez is 8B, I think I looked up. And so it's not a matter of cold that kills it, because it should be fine. It could be that it's on the southern range, and it could be the heat and overwatering. You know, maybe she has it in a low wet place. And she's right about it not being wet. They don't like wet feet, like, you know, most plants, unless they're a plant that's, you know, made for that. But I don't know. I would suggest maybe she move it to another place and try that.
Okay. What do you think, Mr. D?
I agree. I can't figure it out. It ought to come
Kinda
back
weird,
out
yeah.
in the springtime. Hopefully she's waiting long enough, giving it time to come out in the springtime.
Because they are slow to leaf out, but then, you know, in Natchez, it may not even lose its leaves totally.
Yeah, totally right.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe she just needs to move the thing.
Yeah.
Or if it's dead, you know.
Right.
Go get another one.
Yeah, you have to get another one in that case. That's for sure. And the thing about the mulch is this. You know, of course, I would still mulch. You know, I know she said she watched the videos, but I'll still, you know.
Yeah, if she gets it in the right place, it wouldn't hurt to mulch it, because mulch is always good as long as you don't like cake it up around the trunk and the crown of things.
Especially for the winter.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
Serves as a blanket for the roots.
Moderates the temperature changes.
That's for sure. All right, Kara, hope that helps you out there. Here's our next viewer email. I'm going to plant 2 tomato plants next year, and I'm preparing the soil now. I'm using banana peels, coffee grounds, and cornmeal, hoping to attract earthworms. I'm concerned that I could add too much. Is it possible to add too many soil amendments? Please offer some advice. Thank you, and this is Darrell. So Darrell's going to plant 2 tomato plants, right? But he's trying to prepare the soil Right, because he wants to attract earthworms. So what do y'all think about that?
Yeah, well, to answer his question about can you add too many amendments, yes, yes, you can. And I would suggest that Darryl have his soil tested, you know, and just see what it needs.
Don't
you know?
guess.
Don't guess,
soil
you know.
test, right.
And it's 2 tomatoes, you know, he may be that, you know, not very big area he's talking about, so.
If he's got a whole lot of soil amendments, maybe he needs to plant more than 2 tomatoes.
Right, that's why they 2 tomatoes.
That way he could spread it out over a larger area.
Right,
Yeah.
just 2?
Yeah.
I mean, what he's using is, you know, so, it's fine, but yeah, get your soil tested, right?
Yeah, that's what I'd say first thing. Yeah.
Organic material, humus, all that good stuff.
What
and
about
the earthworms
coffee
that come.
grounds? What about the coffee grounds? Is there, I hear
I know a lot of people that
plus and minuses.
Yeah, I do too.
I know a lot of people that use them in community gardens and such.
Yeah, put them in the compost.
Yeah, put it in the compost.
Put
Blend
them in the
them in and all
compost,
that.
yeah, and blend them all in with everything else.
Right.
You
I
know?
think that'll work.
Yeah.
But the cornmeal, now that will attract earthworms. We used to do that when we were trying to attract earthworms for fishing worms, for fishing purposes.
I'd like to know what kind of soil he's got. Like you said, he needs the soil web, doesn't he?
He needs soil web. Check it out. See what,
Yeah.
see what you're sitting on.
Check it out, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You may not need any of this stuff.
You sure might not. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, you can add too many.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. So thank you for that question, Darryl. We appreciate that. All right. Dr. Kelly, Mr. D, was fun. Thank you much.
yeah.
Thank you much. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about protecting your plants this winter or keeping critters out of your garden, go to familyplotgarden.com. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.